All right, it's 1 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started.
Right then.
Welcome, everyone. So, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. On behalf of North Carolina APCO's Regional Training Initiative, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Be the Supervisor You Needed. We're thrilled to have Samantha Hawkins as today's presenter. Samantha is a passionate 911 dispatcher, CTO, and traveling trainer with more than a decade of experience behind the headset. Samantha currently serves as chair of APCO International's editorial committee and is the voice behind the Gold Line Truths series, which is a blog in partnership with Exacom that isn't afraid to tackle real issues we face in emergency communications. So buckle up if you're ready for a session that's going to be equal parts practical, eye-opening, and entertaining. If you've never been in one of Samantha's sessions before, I know you will absolutely enjoy it. So some housekeeping notes for today. Today's session is going to run about 3 hours. Please keep yourself muted during the presentation. Questions are encouraged, so please drop them in the chat at any time, and we'll circle back around whenever there's a point within the presentation that we can address those questions. This session is being recorded. Certificates of completion will be sent out within the next 2 weeks, but don't forget you will need to complete the evaluation form at the end in order to receive credit for the course. And finally, stay tuned because North Carolina APCO has more free training opportunities coming your way. So keep an eye out for details on those. Also, if you will, please make sure that you drop in the chat what city and state you're from or country so that we can see where you're joining us from. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming today's presenter, Samantha Hawkins.
Well, thank you again for that, Samantha. That was an amazingly warm introduction. And y'all, I am pumped. First of all, maybe many of y'all joining today joined last month when we did this. And by the way, I'm gonna be looking at this chat. I see, man, y'all are from all over. First of all, shout out. I see a lot of my home state in here, Georgia. That's what's up. And of course, North Carolina. I would be amiss if I didn't start off from the beginning and saying thank you. Thank you to North Carolina APCO. First of all, as someone who is a trainer, and I've got to speak my piece about training because y'all know, anything about me, training, that's my jam. But this isn't a training class, so I've got to speak my piece right from the beginning about training. As a trainer, I love seeing regional and state training initiatives and seeing what states do all over. And I tell you what, North Carolina, man, y'all doing it right. So every single one of you who are joining now, again, I'm just looking from all over. Of course, I shouted out Georgia and North Carolina, but it's all over. It's Virginia, it's Ohio, California, all over. Thank you, because either you could be joining from your center or you're joining from home. Either way, the fact that you are taking time today to be a part of this conversation says more about you than it does about me giving this presentation. So thank you to every single one of you who's joining today. And thank you to North Carolina APCO chapter that decided to even do this training initiative and has allowed me the opportunity to partner with this chapter to be able to provide this training free to y'all. So awesome job your chapter is doing of sponsoring this training. We got some good stuff today. Now, I said I had to speak my piece in the beginning because I'm always talking to my trainers and I'm always talking to my training professionals, training coordinators, training managers. Some of y'all are in this chat now. But today, it's about a different kind of leadership. And that's another sort of leadership every time we talk about training. But we are talking about the people who supervise, who oversee, who manage, who hold down their shifts, hold down their departments. This is for you. And this is also for those of you who is aspiring to be a supervisor. Because just as I have said time and time again, man, It takes a special kind of person to want to train. Y'all, it takes a special kind of person to step into the role of a supervisor. So this class is for those of you currently doing it, those of you who are aspiring to do it. I hope you will take a lot away. And thank you again for joining. Probably the only thing I like more than challenge coins is I love a t-shirt. And being a traveler, I spent over 10 years. It's like 10 years, 2 months now in 911. My first 8 years I spent at my home center of Cobb County 911, and then I've spent the last 2 years, 3 months as a traveler. And I love going to new centers, and one of the things I'm always hitting them up for is, you got any old uniform shirts? Because I love repping a uniform shirt. So last month when I did the training of how to lose a training in 10 ways, I was repping Buncombe County, North Carolina, and shout out to my Buncombe County people. Yeah, I saw you say that. But I'm repping Link County Communications today. I was at that center for several months. And if you may not be in the chat, but if you are a neighboring agency and you're like, man, I know Lincoln County, man, take the time and just send them a text if you know someone there or whatever, and say, hey, I hear you guys are amazing, because they are amazing. So I'm wearing Lincoln County today to represent North Carolina, which is like really a second home for me. But let's get into this. Y'all. So a little bit about me, and we're going to keep this short and sweet because we got a lot to talk about. We got 3 hours ahead of us. And we've got to take 2 breaks. We're going to take 2 breaks in this, and I've got it paced pretty well because there's no way anybody's got time to sit here for 3 hours and not get up for a break, okay? We're about wellness here, and we're about having sanity breaks to collect yourself to regroup. So we're going to take 2 breaks basically after the first hour, after the second hour. So short and sweet, that's me, y'all. 10 years, over 10 years beneath the headset. And in the last 2 years and a few months, I've gotten to serve now in 5 different centers, okay? 5 different centers, about to serve my 6th. I'm actually headed to Glendale, California. Now, y'all, this is an East Coast girl, okay? California, I love y'all. My Californians in the chat. Look, East Coast girl, I'm not prepared for no West Coast shenanigans, but I am headed out there for a couple of weeks to serve my 6th center as a traveler. So I'm excited to get out there. And anytime, if I'm not doing that, I'm getting to do training like this. And whether bringing training to y'all in person, virtually, my passion. And I do have the blog, the Gold Line Truths blog through Exicom. It's a free blog. If you do not subscribe to that blog, you stay over at the chat. We gonna talk. Because if you follow me on LinkedIn, I'm always talking about that blog. So make sure you subscribe. But let's talk about what this is about. So I'm a big believer. You got to set the tone for any class that you do, okay? You got to set the tone. All right. So let's talk about what this class is for. I am all about back to the basics. And to me, leadership, it's not about those big, grand gestures. There will be moments for that. There will be times for that. But I'll tell you what it's truly about is what you do in the details. It's what you do when no one is expecting it of you. It's what you do when someone isn't looking. So for my leaders in this chat right now, because by the way, if you don't know how this works, we're about this 3 hours. This is a conversation. I am not a foremost authority on this. This is a conversation that we're having. So I expect you to engage, drop stuff in the chat. I'm going to be asking a lot of questions for reflection starting now. If I were to look you in the eye and I said, just straight out to my supervisors in the chat, my managers in the chat, do you take the blame? Now you'd be like, no, wait a minute, Sam. Maybe you're like, oh, well, see, some of y'all, you said yes. I'm looking at the yes, the absolutely's, and everything. Will you accept the responsibility? So you're already ahead of it. Y'all already know. I'm preaching to the choir here. For some new supervisors, they may say, well, wait a minute. What do you mean? What do you mean the blame for what? Responsibility for what? Depends on the situation, depends on what happened. I don't always take the blame. The whole I didn't start the fire. Sam, the fire was already there. It was already burning before I even got here. So I don't take the blame for that. But what I'm asking is, that's right, Shelly. Shelly says in the chat, taking the role of supervisor means you assume the responsibility. Are you willing to own the problem? Are you willing to own the problem and the results of tackling it? So story time, y'all. I told you, back to the basics, right? This story doesn't even involve someone in 911, but it involves someone who owned the problem. So about last month, I was still on assignment. I was at my last travel dispatch assignment, serving in Lincolnton County, and I had ordered some food off of Uber Eats. Now, first of all, I don't need the judgment in the chat. I'll admit sometimes I don't have the best eating habits when I'm on assignment. You just want something quick and easy. And I ordered some food off of Uber Eats. And Wendy's, because I was also being real economical, Wendy's had a buy one get one thing going. And so I ordered some food, and it was a buy one get one. It was like one of the Wendy's biggie bags, and it came with 2 milkshakes. And I was like, well, that's perfect. I've got something for now, and I got something, a little something for tonight, and I've got something the next morning that I'll save and I'll eat. So I ordered it. So my Uber Eats driver shows up at my Airbnb, shows up, and he's stepping out of the vehicle. So I go out there to meet him. I got the notification, okay, he's here. So I'm stepping out to meet him. And the first thing he says out of his mouth is, I am so sorry. Now, I've heard that before. I'm figuring he's like, oh, because it'd been a little minute since I had, between me ordering it and him just showing up. So I'm like, okay, it's a little delay, traffic or whatever. And I knew the Wendy's was like just right down the street. And he says, I'm so sorry. I said, what for? And he goes, well, it's this whole thing. And he told me about, he's like, I got there and they hadn't made your food yet. He said, so at least it's hot. And he has the bag in his hand, by the way. So he's handing me the bag while he's saying, I'm sorry. And he's like, they did your food. And he said, it was about 12 minutes. I was waiting in line for about 12 minutes. And they got your food ready and they gave it to me. So I'm like, okay. And he's like, I actually almost got in an accident while I was headed here and everything. And I could see my 2 milkshakes was in the little drink carrier in the seat, like perfect bag of food, milkshakes, we're good to go. But he's still talking. He's like, yeah, but here's the thing. He said, when I was waiting for your food, there were 2 milkshakes that I noticed on the counter. And he said, I remember thinking the whole time that I saw those milkshakes sitting there, I'm like, man, somebody's about to get themselves some melted milkshakes. Like, it's just sitting there. It's getting warm. He's like, it's almost unrecognizable at this point. And he goes, so, I didn't think much of it. So then 12 minutes later, I gave him the Wendy's. And he looks at the receipt. And he goes, oh, something's missing. 2 milkshakes. And he told me, he said, it never once even dawned on me those were your milkshakes. He said, the whole time I'm like, well, they said they were making your food, so I figured they're making everything. So they said, oh, it's right there. And they pointed to the 2 that had been sitting there like over 12 minutes. Because he said when he walked inside, they were already there, made. Then he stood there for 12 minutes, got the food, and they're like, oh, it's right there. He said, ma'am, I knew in my heart I should have said something right then and there. But I didn't. I figured you had waited long enough and we needed to get the food to you. Pause. Now, I know right now this sounds like it has nothing to do with 911, but it does. Because I realize that in our job, in our ECCs in our workplaces, sometimes we want it quick. We want the bodies in the seat. We're like, hey, they've been waiting long enough. We just need to get it. Sometimes quality gets neglected. We don't mean for it to. We're not doing it maliciously, but it gets neglected. Now let's get back. He says, I accepted the milkshakes. Walked out, drove to you. Said almost got in an accident, but I drove to you. And he said the whole time I was sitting in the car, all I was thinking to myself was there is no way I can give her this. So I sewed up so I could give you your food. But you are not taking these milkshakes. You're not going to accept it. I'm taking it back to the Wendy's. So I've heard the whole story. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, wow, thank you. And let me just say this, because this is going to tie in with something later. One of the first things that I noticed about him when he got out the car was I noticed the Retire Army cap that he was wearing. Okay. So I said, I take the food. I'm looking at the milkshakes. I said, I even went, I inspected. I'm like, that's not your problem. Like, I appreciate that, but that's not your problem. You didn't make it. You didn't have it sitting there. As far as I'm concerned, your job was just getting the food to me. You did your job. I am good. Good. You go. He says, I know it's not my problem. I didn't make the milkshakes. But the moment I accepted it from them, I didn't say anything to them. I didn't say anything like, hey, these have been sitting here for 12 minutes. He said, it became my responsibility as the driver. And he said, ma'am, I don't care, frankly, what you do with these. You can take them if you want. I'm just telling you. I'm going back to the Wendy's. I'm getting you 2 new milkshakes. And I'm bringing them back to you. And that's what he did. I gave him back the old ones. I said again, I said, this isn't on you. And he said, but it is. Because I accepted it. And I didn't say anything to them. So it is on me now. And that man went back. And he showed back up. He told me I was, in fact, his last person, the last customer of the day. And he brought me back 2 new milkshakes. And I'm just, man, you know, as a trainer, you have moments like that where you see something or you experience something. And I knew, oh my gosh, that's going to make it in a class one day. And I had to like, tried to tip him. I ended up like flinging something in the car window because he didn't even want to accept that. And I can't help but wonder, that had anything to do, his mindset, his mentality had anything to do with him being retired military. I asked him before he left, I said, hey, by the way, thank you for your service, sir. How long? He said, 22 years. 22 years. He knew it wasn't his fault that the milkshakes were sitting there. But he realized the moment he accepted it as the Uber Eats driver, he took custody of it, he headed my way, it was now on him. And in his heart of hearts, he made it his problem and he owned it. So I hope I've set the tone for you. So let's be clear, okay? Let's be clear. You might have you may be a new supervisor. You may be a supervisor for a minute and you're looking and you're saying, Sam, I inherited this fire. Sam, I had nothing to do with why my shift is the way it is now. But it's yours now. That man owned 2 milkshakes. How much more do we owe it to our people to own the culture of our workplace, of our centers? How much more do we owe it to them to own the problems? Own how we tackle those problems and own the results. Now, every class that deals with leadership, deals with supervisors, managers, I could say, man, think in your head right now about all the lazy, toxic, maybe the poor, maybe the bad, maybe the poor morals, poor ethics, those supervisors that you never wanted to be like. We're going to talk about a little bit about that later on. But right now, that's not the energy I want to harness. So on this slide, it says, who is your Cass? And Cass was a supervisor. Cassia Cato was a supervisor I served under. That was a supervisor that I wanted to be every bit alike. So for a moment, I want us to pay tribute to the good supervisors we've had. And I ask that you drop in the chat, flood the chat, just with the names of the supervisors that has poured the most into you, that you've learned from, that you've gained insight from, knowledge from, passion from, heart from, because that's what we're harnessing today. Thank you. Thank you. You proved the point. Everybody has a Cass. Cassia Cato is mine, but I'm seeing all the names in here. So for all the toxic leadership moments and failures we've had for leadership, I think a lot of us agree we've had good ones. And even though the title of this class is Be the Supervisor You Needed, implying that maybe you didn't have the supervisor that you wanted back then when you started. At some point in our lives, maybe not in the beginning, maybe it took a couple years in, we did get someone poured into us. So thank you for joining me in that chat and doing that. All right? So here's the objectives of our class. We're going to understand some of the qualities of a strong supervisor in the ECC. We're going to learn about tools for building trust, resilience, and growth. We're going to gain strategies for setting culture intentionally. Keyword on intentionally, because here's the deal. Everything you do is setting a standard. It's impacting culture. I'm talking about intentionally impacting it. And we're going to leave with some practical actions to lead effectively and profoundly. And in every single slide, you're going to see tools, because we want to make sure all the knowledge in the world is awesome. It's awesome. But we want to take it, we want to have stuff we can take back and start doing immediately, right? All right. All right, y'all. So who is the leader? Now, I know y'all some smart folks, okay? Y'all have attended the classes. You already know the drill. This is not even a trick question. Everyone in some capacity is a leader, title or not. And this class could very much, it says be the supervisor you needed, but it could very much be titled be the leader you needed, right? Because leadership basically is influence. And I'm sure every single one of us, if I said, hey, tell me about that person in there who influences things in your center, it may not be a supervisor. It may not be someone with an actual title. As a matter of fact, it could be someone who influences things negatively. And they're not a supervisor, but they've got that sway. They've got that pull. They've got that influence. They set that tone when they walk in. So we realize at the heart of it, right? Someone is always watching, learning, or modeling after us. So for those who said, man, Sam, I didn't even, look, I purposely didn't go for supervisor, Sam, because I don't want anybody watching me. Someone's still watching you, right? Someone's still watching you. But the thing is, if you are a supervisor, if you are a manager, if you are about to take that step and apply to enter the promotional process, you are choosing to be watched, to be learned from, to be modeled after. And so that means you've got to own your influence. Own it. You don't have the luxury as a leader to say, I didn't realize that person was going to watch me do that, and now they're doing it. Nope. That's right. Ronell says someone is always watching on the clock and off the clock. Isn't that the truth? And boy, have we seen that, right? They're watching our social media. Get that, right? Someone is always watching. They're copying. They're modeling. How many times as a supervisor can you imagine if people as coworkers, You, as a coworker, someone could say, "Hey, why did you do that?" And they're like, "Well, because so and so did that." Can you imagine as a supervisor if you do it? Well, supervisor Sam did it. Manager Harris did it. So, since we realize that, how often should we be asking ourselves, evaluating ourselves to say, hey, if a team member of mine copied something that I did today, would I be okay with that? Would I be proud of that? How often should we be asking ourselves that question? Often, right? Daily, every day, after every action, and not just after it, before it too, right? That's the difference between that email that you're about to send and you're hovering over the enter button and you're like, whoa, wait, should I send it? Should I do that? Hmm. Hmm. Is that right? Is that should I? Because as a supervisor, you send that email, you send that. Ryan said, "Don't hit send." You definitely never immediately hit send, right? And Wendy really hit on something. She said, if you have to ask yourself, the answer is probably not, and it's true. You know what? You know what's a real simple thing here? I sometimes I can literally just use as a gauge if if I if I'm about to do this particular thing and I would not want my own grandmother to be aware of it or my own mom, I'm not doing it. Because if I gotta hide it, it's not right. If I'm a supervisor and if I'm trying to do something anonymously, I guarantee you are not meant to do it. Because if I gotta hide behind something, behind a mask, behind a fake name, behind whatever, behind someone else, I shouldn't be doing it. Sarah said, she says, I call it the front page test. Now I call it the viral test. Do you want to go viral for doing this? And that's a great way. Because, right. And that's how influence works, right? See, we love the idea of supervisors that, yes, I want to be a supervisor and a manager because I want to change things. I want to influence things. But let's make sure we're clear about how we want to influence things. Because you can easily be an influencer in the ECC, or you can influence. You can be that person that goes viral, the reason why they had to write that SOP. So let's be clear, what kind of influence are you wanting to have? And if someone today, tomorrow, a year from now, copied that behavior of yours, would you be okay with it? Would you be fine with it? Would you be able to stand to it? Here goes that word again, right? Ownership. I didn't start the fire, Sam. I didn't like that. It's all about mentality, right? Mindset. I just inherited that, and it's my problem. Or I inherited it. It is now my problem, which means it's also my opportunity to be the difference, to lead differently, to own it. Leadership grows when we stop assigning blame. Buck stops here, right? Preston, like you said, Preston says in the chat, he says, change, both positive or negative, is made by the example that we set as leaders. And that is big, right? Because we can't expect 125% of our people. And if it goes well, we want 125% of the credit. But we didn't own the problem from day one. We got to own 100% of the problem, even if it wasn't what we created. And Amy says any problem can be solved. And that's the thing, right? That's why instead of looking at it as, oh man, I just inherited this mountain of trouble. I inherited this bad policy. I inherited this shift. This shift is now not even, let's take away the word problem. It's not your problem. It's your charge. It's your task. It's your job. It's your job. Being a trainer means we know as trainers that there's certain occasions where the very first person lets someone fail, lets someone fall short, they're going to look at their training, right? They're going to look at the trainer and say, did you do your job? Because it's your job. It's not your problem. They're not your problem child. That's your trainee, and it's your job to train them. As a supervisor, are we looking at this stuff that we may inherit as it's a problem, it's a mountain, it's this big issue, or we're looking at it as it's an opportunity to build, to solve, to change. It's mine now. I get to impact it. And if you were blessed and you say, hey, actually, I got blessed with a shift and everything was great, awesome. You still got a job, right? It's your job to keep it that way, because you can have a supervisor come in and inherit just beauty, just glory, just perfect. And then things just start to spiral, right? So it's your job not just to maintain the status quo, because sometimes everything could look great, but it's because things aren't being challenged. People aren't being challenged. Not just maintaining the status quo, but it's your job to keep it afloat. Keep your people growing. Keep your people engaged. But if you did inherit a fire, instead of thinking the fire is the problem, hey, this is an opportunity to put it out. Find the root cause, because maybe it looks like a wildfire, but maybe it's really just a couple of folks that needs a little special attention, needs a little love, needs a little tender, loving, caring refresher training. Either way, you've got to own it. Now we got to talk about legacy leadership. Okay? I've mentioned an example of this in some classes I've taught before, because if you didn't realize it, some of the people that are rising, maybe it may be you, maybe me, right? Some of us who are now growing into these positions of leadership, who's taking on the title of supervisor, manager, deputy director, we came from a different era. And some of those habits that we grew up around, came up around in this profession, are not healthy. And it's one of those things where, again, not being malicious, right? But sometimes those outdated approaches, instead of us separating from it and growing out of it, it came with us. We're carrying it with us into 2025. And now we're the supervisors, we're the managers, we're the directors of our centers. And we're born, our whole 911 career and who we are, a lot of it was molded by some of those habits passed down, right? Whose fault is that? It's everybody's fault. Because here's the thing. I can't blame anyone for coming into a role of leadership, being promoted into a role of leadership, and if they carried toxic habits into that role of leadership, I'm going to look and say, well, maybe they should have gotten some leadership training before they entered that role. Because leadership training should never be an optional thing. And it should never be a simple thing of, well, they've been here X number of years. They know the job. They know the community. They get along with everyone pretty well. Doesn't make someone a good leader, right? Now, some of that can contribute to them being a candidate for leadership. But nothing replaces solid leadership training. And I say this, and here's the thing. I want you to understand. Some of you watching now may say, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want Sam to judge me. I never got any formal leadership. What did I just say? That's everybody's problem. I don't blame you. But if you're watching this class, you're probably that person been looking for classes to be a better supervisor, to be a better leader, to get that formal training. And you can bring all the heart and passion in the world, and we need that, right? But you realize that nothing replaces the training, because that's the only way we can overwrite some of those old habits that's been passed down. A lot of us came up in an era where we just did whatever goes, right? I mean, and someone like me, look, I haven't even been in this profession all that long. We're looking at, going on 10 and a half years, right? I came up in an era where if my CTO said, Sam, before we click this key on the keyboard, I need you to knock 4 times on the desk. I'd have been knocking. Because in my mind, I came up in an era where we did what our CTO says. That's not the case now. In 2025, going into 2026, your training is going to be like, why am I doing that? What does me knocking 4 times on the desk have to do with this key on my keyboard, right? But that's an example of the leadership that we've come from and the habits that we've come from. And it's not saying that it's all bad, but it's saying that's why it's important to have this leadership training. Because if we don't have it, we'll never overwrite those old habits that still live in us. You've seen that quote before. What comes to mind when you think about it? Is there anyone in this chat that sees it and says, nah, Sam, actually, I disagree? This is a judgment-free zone. You can say that. You may say, nah, I don't see that. And that's not saying that's the only reason why they leave. There's many different reasons why people leave. I get it. But do we agree that a lot of times leadership plays a part? So I'm seeing the yeps and the yeses, and some, yes, it's not the only reason. It's a lot of the reason. And that's great. Y'all agree. But my leadership, you realize that now that could apply to you if you're not the difference. You realize that we could replace that. If you are not the supervisor that someone needs, then that quote, I'll just use myself for example, could easily say people don't leave bad jobs. They didn't leave this job because it was bad. They left because Sam was a bad leader. So for all the discussion we can have about leadership training, the lack thereof, or it done wrong, I'm just gonna throw a question out here in the chat. What is one industry, one group of workers that just when you think about good leadership training comes to mind? That they do it right. And I'm not saying it's 100% perfect, but what is one industry that you just think like there's a lot of great stuff that we can take from them? And there really isn't it isn't just a one size fits all, because I see a lot of folks saying Chick-fil-A. I mean, the Lord's chicken. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But there is one I want to focus on for this conversation. And I think when you see this slide, you're going to go, oh, yeah, I can see it. And it's not that it's 100%. But I was at a conference not too long ago, and I got to talking to this guy, and he was about to do a class on leadership. And I was real interested. I was like, are you from public safety? And he was like, well, no, he had never worked in 911. And somebody in the chat just, yeah, Stephanie, that's where I'm about to go with it. And he said, well, I'm actually, I'm former Air Force. And he was at a 911 conference, and I got the opportunity. I had a little time, so I sat in there, and I was just blown away. I tell you what, we know 911, it's our club, right? But y'all, there's so many industries out there that we could learn from. I know there's a friend of mine who she goes to human resources conferences sometimes because she's like, man, there's some great stuff that human resources professionals, HR professionals are taught that we could apply, we could incorporate in our training in 911. But where I'm going at it here in this, for the purpose of this class, of someone who does leadership training pretty well, it's the military. Now that I gave you that, I probably have some folks in here in this chat who are former military, could be reserve. Why do you think that? Let me go back out of here. Just wager a guess. There's really no wrong answers here. Why do you think there's a difference? What is the difference between what the military does in terms of leadership training that is different than how a lot of sectors do it in 911? Some folks are saying discipline, yeah, accountability, structure and discipline. They always train their replacements. Jessica K said they always train their replacements. John said training. All right, let's go to the next slide. The way they train is they don't train you to be a good leader after you got the title. They train you that at a moment's notice, if something goes down and the person who is currently in charge gets taken out of the picture, the next person at the next level can immediately assume that role. And then if they got taken out of the picture, the next person, the next soldier can immediately assume that role. That's leadership training from day one. And that's the difference. Because I don't know about your centers, but a lot of centers I've seen, we train after you get the job. We train after you get the title. We train as if it's a reward, like, okay, you earned the title, so now we train you. But we don't train our replacements from day one. You do realize the trainee that's in day 5 of training, they're not going to be a training forever, right? We do realize that they may be the future supervisor, especially the way turnovers work. I have seen individuals come in and in a matter of months, they get released and ultimately they're the CTO because that's how turnover works. So is it really fair to be training people after they get the title? If we take some lessons from the military, they have a tiered type of leadership training. It's progressive. It builds. It's intentional. There is nothing accidental about how they train. And it's crazy because it's the two, right? On the one end, they're training good followers. There goes the concept of followership. They train soldiers, they're training followers, but they're always also giving them new responsibilities over the course of their training to build experience. They're always being mentored in some capacity. They're always also cross-training them. There you go. Yes, Flora. They're making sure everyone's cross-trained so that when they do, if they have to assume a leadership role, it's not like, oh wow, where did this come from? It's intentional. It's progressive. They know what they're doing. It's very strategic. And so you're not just, okay, flip of a switch, great, you're a supervisor now, which is how it feels like. And for some of us who've been in roles, maybe you felt like you entered an administrative role and it just felt like I just went from the floor to being in an admin role overnight, like in a matter of a weekend. And it's just, well, just flip a switch. You're a leader now. You're an admin. And you weren't allowed the opportunity to grow into it because you weren't getting that training pre-title. That's why mentorship is important. That's why building block training is important. Intentional training with the realization that the people who are supervisors now are not going to be supervisors forever. So we absolutely have to be building upon the training and building new experiences in for our people so they can properly grow as leaders. It's a hard truth. Now, you don't have to drop the name of your, I'm not saying put the name of your comm center in here. We're not trying to drag anyone, but how many of you, show of hands, show of yeses, would say, if I said, are you the leader that you are? Are you the supervisor, the manager that you are today? Because of the training you got, or because of the supervisors that you had? Or are you the manager you are today because of them, or in spite of them? What would you say? And if for those who said, oh, I'm absolutely the supervisor I am today because of some of those names that you flooded the chat with, absolutely. But some of you may say, in spite. But that's why we did that. Because we can always, I always get the in spite of, and it resonates with me too. I always get that in spite of. I get it. But we had some good leaders that we pulled from, right? And I think, yes, I see a lot of y'all in the chat saying both. Because it's true. For the mentors that you might have had the opportunity to be mentored with care and with patience. But for some who says, I didn't have that. For some of you who watch the names flood in the chat and says, Sam, to be honest, I didn't have that before I became a supervisor. I didn't have that when I started. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a leader to look to, which means you probably just had to make the conscious choice to lead differently. And that resonates as well. You just had to be that person to say, you know what? The feeling I'm feeling right now, I don't want anyone to ever feel because of me. And if that's the case, give yourself a round of applause. Because I realize that's the case for a lot of people. Amy in the chat, she said, I remember thinking that they were heartless. Right? You know, supervising, managing, that gets lonely. It can get so lonely on the mountaintop. Right? But it can get even lonelier if you don't feel like you have someone above you to turn to look up to. So pause for reflection. What are those pain points from your past that we shouldn't be looking at as, oh yeah, yeah, I wear those scars and I'm better because of it. Now maybe you are leading better in spite of it, but you didn't need that to be better. You shouldn't have needed that to be better. And what are that way? Just one way right now that you will do differently than the supervisors who might have failed you. So I mentioned in a class before, I had attended, it's like end of last year. It was a great leadership class, great instructor. And there was a scenario that was posed. And you know when you take a multiple choice question and there's the same formula for potential answers, right? There's always that one answer that is absolutely wrong. There's that one answer that kind of could be right. There's the one that is right, and then there's like all of the above. And you're like, nah, it's not all of the above. I kid you not. In that class, the scenario was posed. They asked the question of like, what would you, and it was a class on effective leadership, effective people-driven leadership. And so the scenario was posed, and the individuals in the class, a lot of them were already leaders, were asked to choose the answer. And it was like, if you choose answer A, go to this corner. If you choose answer B, go to this corner. Yeah. The answer that was like the wrong answer, the majority of those in the class went there. Why? Because what did we just, that slide about legacy leadership? And when I asked the question, and I said, I just picked someone out of that group, and I said, can you tell me, like, no judgment, I just want to know, why did you choose the answer you chose? And her answer to that, she said, well, because my supervisor, like 19 years ago, gave me that answer. And I'm still here 19 years later, so I'm good. And it was like, but that's not a scar that made you better. You think it's a scar that made you better. What it really is, it's a pain point that you just persevered through. Because I said how we came from a different era of leadership, right? Some of us, we just did whatever. We just sucked it up. We just kept it moving. Brittany in the chat, she said that's just the way we have always done it. And that was basically it. It was simply 19 years ago, my supervisor said to do this. And so 19 years later, I'm going to tell my people to do it. That's why we have this class. Because it's not just about being the supervisor you had. I want you to be the supervisor you needed. And sometimes looking backwards, if you're looking back 19 years, or you're looking back 10 years, you're like, oh, it wasn't that bad, because I'm still here. I'm still here. Yeah, in the moment, I felt so lonely, and I cried, and it was a lot to get over, but I'm still here, so it's okay. It worked out. No, it wasn't okay. And again, those of you who are supervisor or manager, director, you chose this, right? You chose this job. Now it is your duty to do differently by them. Jessica, I see in the chat, you mentioned how y'all have the problem in your center of employees that don't want to step up and take on leadership roles. And that's a whole other thing too. So when we say about owning the problem, right, that's something we got to own too, right? Because is it possible, and it's not just saying your center, but is it sometimes they see the supervisors they have and they're like, I don't know if I really want that. My supervisor's burnt out. Is that going to be me if I take on supervisor's duties? They jaded. They're burnt out. They're burnt to a crisp. Geez, there's like nothing positive coming out of their mouth. Do I really want to do that if that's what being a supervisor looks like? I feel like I'll just be happier, just clock in, clock out. Let me have no responsibilities. And I chuckle, but that's the reality. I know people who are awesome people in this field who literally have said, I don't want to be a supervisor anymore. I don't want to train anymore. Right? Because that's if what we're presenting to them is this image of, will you enter this role and just expect to be changed for the worse? Maybe that's the root cause of why they don't want to accept it. And Jessica, you said that's also because the supervisor isn't being fed either. And that could be it. You're right. Goes back to, right? That's why we train, right? That's why we train. That's why supervisors need training. Because training doesn't just enhance skills, it refreshes skills. It renews fire. Amy, I see you in the chat. Shout out to former Buncombe County, my Gold Line family forever from there. She said, I wanted to be a supervisor to help all people in need, not just callers, but our own peers. And that is you. And so here's the thing, right? That's the difference. I guarantee you there are people that will look at you and guess what? Because of the image you present, they would want to be that. Being a supervisor does mean we own the image of what leadership looks like. But it does go back to, are our people, were any of you in the chat, were you promoted without leadership training? Because if you didn't get that opportunity to have training that will help you to overwrite some of those old habits, some of those poor habits, some of those bad habits, then you're going to be the supervisors you are by default. We need more onboarding checklists for supervisors. You notice how it says not just the operational one. I'm not just talking about the little checklist that says, can you do this as a supervisor? Okay. Can you do you know how to fill out this form, and do you know how to, payroll stuff? I mean, the onboarding ones that digs deeper. Do you know how to have those difficult conversations that you inevitably are going to have to ask as a supervisor? I'm gonna drop this for you guys because you're gonna see this later. So I'm gonna give you a little spoiler. When you see a slide later on in this class that says confrontational leadership, you're gonna go, oh, that's bad. But it's not for this class. Because part of that stuff that we need in good leadership training is teaching leaders sometimes how to confront things. But if you just have checklists that just deal with the technical stuff, your new leaders are not going to ever have that training. They won't get that. And how many leaders are getting promoted into positions, and the minute they have to have that difficult conversation, they're like, yeah, I wasn't taught about that. Or I was taught how to fill out a form. I was taught what to do if I notice that we're going to be below minimum staffing today, and I was taught who to call. I was taught who I need to contact if this kind of call comes in. Are we practicing mentorship in our centers? Are we doing that? Or are we saying, don't worry about it. What got you into the supervisor position will carry you through. Don't worry about it. 19 years ago when I started, I just winged it, and I'm okay. So just do what I do and fill in the gaps, roll the dice. That's not fair. It's not fair to those of you in the seat who had that happen. And you're still here, and you're probably doing the best that you can. But it might have looked like when you entered the role of supervisor, it looked like a lot of rolling that dice, just winging it. Adam, that's it. You said he says in the chat, he says, from my experience, there's a focus on technical ability, but very little of those soft skills and empathy. And that's true. We've got to make that a part of our checklist as well. Because if I ask you the question to my supervisors and managers in the chat, who will care if you're not their supervisor tomorrow? Will anyone care? Would they be throwing parties on your behalf? Will they even recognize? Will they even know? Right? But as supervisors, we got to own that too, right? Do our people, the people in your charge, if I ask them, do your supervisor care if you don't show up tomorrow? Would they say, oh, they'll care because we probably wouldn't have enough people to staff the positions? Or would they say, oh, they'll care because they care about me? We're all replaceable. It certainly feels that way, doesn't it? And here's the truth. We are replaceable. But we can still make so much of an impact in the roles we serve in that they can replace us, but the impact is still felt years down the line, right? Y'all matter. You matter. We said about people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad leadership. But here's the flip side. You realize there are people literally still in the seat doing what they do, showing up because of some of you. There are some people in the seat who are supervisors, your managers, your leaders, and there are folks who would tell you, and maybe they haven't told you. They may think it though. But the only reason why I'm showing up today is because this person's going to be there. This supervisor is going to be there when I come in. So yeah, we can talk about, one of the number one reasons why people leave, but you're also some of the reason why people stay. And if you don't believe it, how many times will a supervisor leave, a director leave, a deputy director leave, and then here goes folks, whoo, out the door. Oh, where are you going? You going to that center? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's closer to where I live at anyway. I'll slide over there. There are some of you, some supervisors, you are the closest thing the new people have seen to the director. I've been in centers as a traveler, and I'm there. I've been in some centers for months, and I've never met the director. The only face of leadership that I saw were the supervisors. So are you? Ask yourself, are you the reason why someone would want to stay? Are you that manager, that supervisor that builds retention by recognizing the efforts of people, not just the results, not just what their output and what they do in the seat, but recognize who they are? And I hope you give yourselves credit, because some of you are doing what you can with what you have. And you may say, well, Sam, no one has told me that, so I don't know. Doesn't mean that's not true. Doesn't mean that's not true. You matter. You matter. I talk all day about training and training being the business of people empowerment, and it is. But do you realize, supervisors, there are people who come into this job, they come into this workplace, and we got young folks, this is their first real world job. They've got no guidance. They've never been through a professional development class or anything. You are the closest thing they will ever have to someone being like, let's talk about what your passions are. What drives you? What motivates you? Flora says, speaking as a CTO, she says, I let my trainees know when they are doing a good job. And that matters. That goes back to those soft skills, right? You realize that's part of leadership too, right? There's all that technical stuff. But building people up is how we communicate to them. That's why on the slide, it's things like the language we use, right? Hey, did you finish this? Hey, did you get this done? Hey, I told you needed to fill this out. Did you fill that out? As opposed to, hey, looks like you didn't finish this. So what support do you need to get this done? What do you need from me right now, tomorrow, whenever, to get this done? That's why we've got to reverse it. I talked about leadership, legacy leadership. But you know what is real? Ooh, the leadership legacy. Because again, y'all in the chat, y'all were like, I'm replaceable. And that's everyone. That's me, that's everyone. But some of you, the impact you have made, you walk out that door and soar. 10 years gone, 15 years gone, 12 years gone, whatever, gone. And they could replace you. But what you did in that role as supervisor, it leaves an imprint forever. Because you can take the person out of the center, you can take the supervisor, take them away, take the title away. Somebody is going to remember how you made them feel. I mentioned when we were flooding the chat, and I mentioned the supervisor for me, Cass. She's not my supervisor anymore. It's years ago. She's not even at that center anymore. She's not even at that center anymore. She was replaced ultimately, right? Someone, and when we say she was replaced, they replaced the supervisor, right? Oh, we had a vacancy, and so they filled that vacancy. Someone else was promoted. That's how it works. Do you think this girl forgets how C made her feel, though? Because I haven't. I have never forgotten how she showed up for me as a leader. And you leave your center tomorrow, a week from now, a year from now. How many people are going to remember how you made them feel? And you know that because as some of y'all in the chat are dropping in there, you've got people who you'll never forget how they made you feel. So we're about to go to our first break, but I wanna leave this here, right? Leadership is a muscle. As we're talking about these things and we're talking about these tools, I don't want you to think, Sam, you're just piling on more for me to do. That's not how this is. It's a muscle. And like any muscle, the more you work it, the more comfortable you get in doing it and being that person. And that's what our goal is. I want you to strengthen your leadership muscle. But you can only do that by being consistent. That didn't say being perfect, because you're not going to be perfect. The same way as a trainer, I have said to trainees day in, day out, you are going to make mistakes. Saying you're going to make mistakes isn't giving them an excuse to make a mistake. It isn't, now they're going to make a mistake because you said it. No, they're going to. Leaders, you have made mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make more mistakes. It's not perfection, but how consistent you are, how effective you are, how strategic you are. I keep building upon those good habits, not the habits that we just grew into because, hey, we've been doing it this way and our leaders did it this way and that cycle, but that intentional leadership, intentional about what we say and what we do. You keep strengthening that muscle and you'll find gets more and more comfortable to work that muscle, that leadership muscle. So I think we're doing great. I think we're doing excellent. I hope how you guys feeling? We're going to take 15. Get up, walk, do whatever you got to do. And we're going to come back. 224. I'll be here, y'all. Couple minutes here. Get back into it. Yeah, Lisa, I'm with you on that. So I grew up with a sister who was a huge Swiftie. Not so much now, but was a huge Swiftie. So a lot of her classic songs I do know. But there are a couple of songs from this new album that I'm like, it's been living rent free. And oh snap! Did someone just say whistlist in the chat? Yes, Casey or Cassie. Don't know how to pronounce, but Miss Edwards. Yes, this recording will be, I believe, sent out. That's a question for Samantha Dutch, but these are recorded, so I believe these will all be sent out on demand at some point for all who registered for this class. So yes, ma'am, that is the case. And yeah, Whistlist is one of those songs that's been in my head recently. and there's another song that I'm not gonna say the name of it, but if you know, you know, and it's 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 got like a Jackson 5 beat to it, and I'm just like, oh, okay. Well, thank you for letting us know. And oh, Connie, you said you had some Chick-fil-A delivered for free. That's good. That's good. You can never go wrong with some free Chick-fil-A. Absolutely. Absolutely. I love it. Yes, Susan, I don't mind. And I will tell you, so at the end of this class, we'll have my email and send me an email to my email address. I do not mind getting you that. No problem at all. So, cute. And with that, oh my gosh, your closest Chick-fil-A is 3.5 hours away. No. All right, it's 2:25, y'all. We gotta get back to it. We gotta get back to it. We'll have another 15-minute break in about an hour. But let's get back. I hope you stretched, maybe did a little reflection, maybe just grabbed a snack, back ready to go. All right, let's do it. Let's do it. So remember, we just talked about leadership being a muscle that we have to work. Gotta work. And so that's a big thing. And yes, I do have to quickly say hello to Sophie. I see Sophie in the chat. Miss my girl. Miss you more, Amy. So here's the question. Here's the question. Actually, more of a statement. No one should be surprised you're a supervisor. In my old center, we had, and I'm just gonna go ahead and drop his name. It may not even ever get back to him, but we had an awesome dude. He is still there, and he is currently a supervisor. His name's Brian. And Brian was one of those guys, on top of the fact that he was an amazing CTO, he was very empathetic. Could he, when we talk about ownership and owning like your role with your trainees and owning your role in the center, man, he did that. And he did that even before he was a CTO, but I knew him. I knew him as a CTO for a long time. He'd been there longer than I had at the center. And he was the type of guy. He was a great trainer. There was not a single trainee that came from his training that did not have the best reviews to give about Brian. And I think he had a record as well in the center of a lot of his trainees stuck around. And a couple of them either became CTOs or became supervisors or were like on that track to be a CTO, to be a supervisor. Very much because of what he did, what he poured into them. And I'm just talking about him as a CTO. And one of the things Brian would do is he had this kind of this mindset that if he was having a rough day, he was like, man, I'm having a rough night. He was on the evening shift. He was like, man, I'm having a rough night or something. He'd go, you know what? I need some pizza. I need some pizza. I need to get me a pizza. I need to get a pizza pie, and I feel like it'll make it better. And he'd say, if I'm having a rough night, maybe the other folks around me, they're having a rough night too. And he would buy pizza pies. I say all that to say, before I left, he had been made a supervisor, and it's interesting because one of those when I left my old center, um, walked away from an admin role title and 8 years and became the traveler and doing what I'm doing now as a speaker and filling in the seat, supporting those of you who still do this day in, day out, me helping y'all, the helpers, with staffing. He was actually the person there was because there's no fanfare, right? Sometimes you walk away. I got some nice gifts and I had a nice little party, and there was no parade walking out, but it was Brian. Brian, he took my one of my newest badge. Of course, I have like my old badges. He took my badge and gave me a hug, and I walked out. That my final day, right? Here's the thing: when Brian became supervisor, nobody sat back and went, "Really? Him?" That's a head scratcher. And I say that because we all know, I'm not putting their names in the chat because we're not trying to drag anyone, right? But we all know there's those people that gets promoted and we go, really? That's an interesting choice. No one was surprised Brian made supervisor. If anything, people were like, about darn time. Absolutely. When I became CTO, no one was surprised. When I became a training technician, no one was surprised. No one should be surprised that you are a supervisor. And you may be already in this role, and you may say, well, there were folks surprised, Sam, and I surprised myself. I will say this. You're in the role. It's yours. Own it, right? If they were surprised when you got promoted, they should not be surprised now that you're still in that position. Because that is your role to own, and that is your position to make your own. And those people that are now in your care are your people to care for. For Brian, no one was surprised that he became a supervisor because his leadership started before he ever got the title. The mindset that he had of, you know what, I'm having a rough day, I'm having a rough shift, and I bet that those around me are too. So I'm going to do something to lift their spirits. We joke about the pizza party, right? And this just came up. I had a great conversation with my friends Keely and Halcyon. We had a great conversation on the circle for Rapid SOS. Keely was, hosting, and this came up, and it said, we joke about the pizza party, right? Hey, when Brian ordered pizza, people were on board, right? Because he knew in that moment it was a rough night, it was rough calls. That pizza that he bought meant I don't have to go do a food run. Meant I didn't have to worry about dinner. They didn't have to worry about, man, I packed a dinner for today or lunch for today, and I really don't want what I packed in that Tupperware. They had dinner. So in that case, pizza party, yes, because he knew his shift. He knew his people. Connie in the chat, she says, my people like cake and ice cream, right? Because at the end of the day, it's your people. And it may look like, hey, I'm going to buy a dinner. I'm going to buy a meal for y'all because I know my people, look, they want to eat. And that's one thing they don't have to worry about. And that's one thing they don't have to pay for. And he was doing that. He was doing that before he became supervisor. He was showing, I'm taking ownership of this shift that I'm on. He wasn't even overseeing it. There were supervisors on the shift working the nights he worked. And he was showing ownership like he was a supervisor already. That's awesome because he did that on his own. But we said earlier, right? We talked about how the military trains, right? And how they're always training their replacements. So how are we, my supervisors, my managers, my directors, and if you're doing this, drop it in the chat. I want to see it. What are you doing to encourage and to inspire those people on your shift to start showing leadership and ownership? Now, I'm not talking about going to them and saying, hey, maybe you should go buy some pizza pies for the shift, right? But here's the thing. If they come to you and you've got those people who are so passionate and they come to you and be like, I want to do this. And can I throw a party? And I want to organize this. And I want to organize some team building. Are you just stomping them down? Or are you recognizing that's them showing glimpses of leadership before they get the title? And are you encouraging that? I'm looking at the chat. I see Sarah said, I point out how people listen to them. I encourage their decorating and all of that. Anna says, I encourage people to go for what they want. Are we opening up meetings, right? Instead of everything closed door, again, encouraging those future leaders. Because being a good supervisor, being the supervisor you needed, because we all agreed, a lot of us agreed in the chat, when you got into that role, you were just winging it, right? Nobody might have sat down with you and gave you, hey, here's a checklist beyond the technical stuff of this is what you need to know and this is what you need to be prepared for. I have never seen a checklist that will say something like, hey, you need to know your people to know when they do need a pizza party, when they need that crumble cookie flight, like I saw someone in the chat dropped in, right? We want to build trust. Would you trust you as a leader? Because people trusted Brian long before he became a supervisor. They trusted because they already saw it. I can't tell you, man, if I had $1 for every time I've done a class about leadership or something, and I'll have someone come to me and say, I'm a leader, Sam, I just got in this new supervisor role, and I'm trying to figure out how to make people respect me. Now, when I say that, that's not a blanket thing, what I'm about to say, because I get it is real. Some people get into new roles of leadership and they deal with that. Could be jealousy. It could be just people having to adjust to this new thing. This person was your peer, now they're your supervisor. But one of the things I will say is, here's the deal. If you are just concerning yourself with how to make people respect you, or how to get people to respect you now that you have the title, that's too late. Because Brian built respect before he got the title. So when he got the title, he didn't have to wonder, how am I going to get folks to respect him? They already did. Because this was Brian of just yesterday that was the one buying us pizza. This was Brian from yesterday, from last week, that was the one checking in on us, being peer support for the people in his shift. So, starts before the title. The habits, right? Goes back to those habits. The same way that some of us are built from those old habits of the old supervisors we had. What are those new habits that we got to overwrite those old habits? So how are we overwriting? I don't know the kind of leader that Brian had. I don't know if he's the supervisor he is because of who he had as a leader. It could have been because of them, or it could have been in spite of them. All I know is who he is as a supervisor now. And if he is the supervisor that he didn't have, he is certainly the supervisor that people needed. I have a friend in this industry, D. Jeremy DeMar. And sometimes, if for those of you who might follow me on LinkedIn, apologies, I post a lot on LinkedIn, okay? Because I don't have a Facebook, so LinkedIn is like my main social media. I've got an Instagram account and I've got my LinkedIn, so I post a lot of posts. And sometimes I'll post something and he'll comment on it and he'll put something like ABB, and I'll put ABB back. And ABB was something that he told me many, many, many years ago. Like when I first started speaking and kind of putting myself out there. He said, Sam, ABB, always be branding. And I remember the first time he said it, I was like, oh yeah, I get it, because, I represent the brand of my agency. And he's like, no. He's like, you do. but I'm talking about your personal brand. Because leadership is very much a brand. So, what does your brand say about the kind of leader you are? Because here's the deal. The importance of branding yourself and projecting the image that you want to project is that you're going to project an image. I don't have to stamp myself with a logo and brand myself. There's an image that I present. If you've ever seen me teach, or this is your first time, over these hours, I am branding myself as someone. I'm branding myself either as a hot bag of air. I'm branding myself as someone who's passionate and cares about this profession. I'm branding myself to you. So that's why we say always be branding, in that you've got to be proactive about the image. Because the image will be developed accidentally, without your input, without you directly giving input or influencing it, or it will be built because you proactively have built that image for yourself. So if you had a logo, right? If you had a logo, if you had a brand that people associated with you. When I asked in the chat, I was like, hey, and I was like, think about an industry or a group of workers that just, when you think about good leadership training, how many people dropped in the chat Chick-fil-A, right? Why? Because of branding. Because of the reputation connected to that branding. Because of very much the image they present, and all of the qualities and the values and what they adhere to that is associated with that branding. Chick-fil-A, the reason why so many people would say, yeah, Chick-fil-A are awesome leadership, awesome training, that's not accidental. That's intentional. That was built off of intentional branding and strategic marketing and strategic training. So if I asked you right now in the chat, give me 3 adjectives that you want associated with your brand, your logo, your image of leadership, what would you say? What would be those 3 adjectives? What would be those 3 traits that you want people to associate with your brand as a supervisor? Not just the brand that you represent with whatever agency you're with, but the brand you represent as a supervisor, as a manager. I see understanding, I see caring, accountability, empathetic, all awesome, authenticity, strong, honest, caring, trustworthy, real, I like it, kind, forward thinking, accessibility. This is a great list, and we could go on and on. That could be the class. So then the next question is, how well are you aligning your daily choices, your actions as a supervisor, as a leader, as an influencer in your center? How well are you aligning with all of those words you've dropped in the chat? Are you like, well, Sam, I align pretty well on Mondays, but it's touch and go Wednesday, Thursday. Well, I align pretty well when my best friend's working with me. I align pretty well when it's a good day, and nothing too eventful is going on. And I'm not judging. I'm asking. Not asking. You don't gotta answer that to me, but you gotta answer that to yourself, right? Because Chick-fil-A isn't just the image, it's not just what they put out there for marketing and stuff. I said all that strategic, right? But they could have put all that marketing about everything and yes and kind and it's my pleasure, right? It's the fact that their people are trained to align with that image, because all of the branding in the world doesn't do it alone. So all of these adjectives you have dropped is absolutely great. Inspirational. I love that, Amy. All of these adjectives are great. But that's just words alone if you are not proactively aligning your behaviors as a leader to those traits. That's how it works. Let's talk about this quickly. Because you know what? I love change. I love change. We talk about change as one of those, right? In the realm of dispatch, nobody likes change, but we always want change. All of that, right? And change is good. Progress is great. But my supervisors, my leaders, my managers, my directors, please, please bear in mind, motion alone is not progress. You can make moves and make changes and do new things and add new projects and create new policies and write new SOPs and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And if you're doing all that and there's no purpose to it, that's not progress. That's just movement. I can go up, down, sideways, backwards, forward. That's movement. Progress has to look like changes, movement, all of those adjustments, all of those things with purpose, with direction, with meaning. Now, why am I saying that? Is there anyone's in the chat that has just moved up into a new leadership role, like just promoted, just stepped into a new role? It's still fresh, it's still hot, and you're like, man, fires, Sam. I've just got started. Anyone's in the chat? Sally, it's awesome. This is awesome. All right, Adrian. All right, seeing folks drop in the chat. First of all, again, round of applause to you, all right? I say all the time to trainers, you could have chose any avenue to go in, and for my trainers, I hype them up. Those of you who chose leadership, formal leadership, man, that's one. Look, Laurel said 1 year ago, I moved off the crew as a supervisor after 18 and a half years, and now the training coordinator. Thank you. Tate, I believe I saw you mention how you don't have a formal role, but you've been tasked with like creating a new program. Dude, that's awesome, right? I want to say something quickly to you. So when I started in this industry, I started back in 2015. And in that time, when I was still at my old center, that in that 8 years, I served under 3 directors. Every single director that I served under guaranteed would come in and they would make changes, right? Changes. And we had a running joke. We had a running joke in our center that one of the automatic things, I don't know if this is just the case in a lot of centers, but it was the case in ours. Every time we got a new director, we would be like, what's the first thing they change? Be the uniform policy. And I don't know if it's because it's just one of those, it's just a quick, simple way to like like an executive decision to make, to be like, I'm here, I'm here, I'm immediately make an impact. Like, you know what, we're going to change this uniform policy. And when I started in 2015, we had one uniform, and then the next director was like, we're going to change that. And then the next director, we're going to change that. Now I say that sometimes you may need to change the uniform policy, right? There's going to be changes that you might need to make. There may be tasks, there may be projects that you do have to change. But don't be that supervisor. You're in the new role, got this fire, and you feel like, right? Because imposter syndrome is a beast. You feel like to prove you belong there, belong at the table, belong in the decision-making role, belong in this new role of oversight. I've just got to make changes. Because just moving and making moves and making waves with no direction, with no real purpose to it, that's not the kind of change you want. So when you get in there, please take the time to truly assess everything, right? Assess what is going in, what is in place, what is working, what maybe need to be revamped. You got to have conversations with your people. Because in some cases, change is just not what you need. It's not just, I just want to change things. And I know it because I'm guilty of it. I'm one of those people all the time. I just want to change it. I just want to impact it, want to rewrite it, want to make it different, want to make it better. And sometimes you're just changing for the sake of changing. Shelley said upon gaining the role of supervisor, her supervisor advised her to get to know her role, get to know her team. And that is super more important than immediately being like, let's just change this policy. Right? Because there's progress, true progress, and then there's just processes. It's just the motions that you do. That's just movement, but there's no real direction. Take time. All right? Remember, remind yourself as often as you need to. Don't let imposter syndrome be the reason that you feel like you've just got to go get right out of the gate doing stuff. You belong there. And you're going to prove you belong there through the changes that you do make strategically and intentionally, not just because I have to feel like I'm doing something to show why I'm here, why I'm now a supervisor. Starts with you. Starts with you. Story time. Now, when I first started doing public speaking and speaking at conferences, there was a session that I did, and it was called "Help Me, I'm the Difficult Employee." And I created it, and at the time, we'd gotten a new director in it at our agency, and I remember presenting it to her, and it just made sense that to bring her on to kind of have like my story from my perspective as a frontline person, and her as leadership. And she was not there doing that chapter of my life, and I thought she'd be perfect for it. She really was, because she was definitely a different kind of leader than the type of leadership that I had during this chapter of my life. But here's the story, right? When we talk about be the supervisor that you needed, I'm going to talk quickly about an example of the supervisor that I needed way back when. So there is this chapter in my life that I wish I could just completely forget. But I realized you got to remember that stuff, right? Some of those stuff, it's not that it made me better, but it reminds me of what I never want to become as a leader. In my agency, we there was a time when we would have our lunches. And I know y'all, you're like mouth dropped open, like our lunch breaks. Whoa. But there was a time, when we would have our lunches, and so you had time to like go for a run on the treadmill. You could definitely eat. And in my case, because I was on night shift for like the first 3 years that I was at my center, trained on night shift and ended up staying on that night shift, I would go nap. And we had down there at, on like the lower floor of our center, there was these leather couches, and so I'd sprawl out on it and I'd go to sleep. And what started to happen, and it didn't happen like immediately, me being on night shift. It didn't start to happen. It actually didn't start to happen until a couple of years in, where I'd go to sleep. And so since I was on night shift, I usually took my lunch either at 11 at night, or I took it at midnight. And I would wake up to tapping on my shoulder, and someone would be like, "Sam, you're due back upstairs like 5 minutes ago." And when I tell you, y'all, I racked up so many tardies. It was embarrassing. And it was so embarrassing because people would say to me, "Sam, you have got to be the only person in the history of the center who every single tardy you have came And you got tardies and never left the building. It was never tardy coming into work. It was never tardy because you left and went somewhere on your lunch hour. You were inside the building. They knew exactly where I was at. So they'd look and they'd be like, oh, Sam's not back. And they would go straight down and they knew where I was at. I was on the couch. So I racked up a lot of tardies and ultimately some suspension days. And it was looking pretty grim for me. That was the problem. Okay? That was the problem that my supervisors were dealt with. Because the reason why it's hard, to think about that chapter, right? It's because I said on a previous slide how there's supervisors who you never forget how you made them feel, how they made you feel. And there's people, you as a supervisor, they will never forget how you made them feel. And it's a hard chapter because there were supervisors during that time I will never forget how I felt, how they made me feel. Like I was a problem child. I was a burden. Here's the thing. I was the same person getting commendations, getting, all the time, hey, Sam, thanks for coming in 4 hours early, staying 4 hours late. Thanks for being here. Thanks for coming in on, hey, to swap with this person. Thanks for working however many hours of OT we need you to work. Thanks for always being kind and gracious, being the highest call taker on these shifts. And just like that, I was the problem child. I was a supervisor so that I could tell, I was the employee, that the supervisors I could tell would look and go, wonder if she's gonna come up from the couch on time tonight. That was the problem. My supervisors in the chat, what do we do about problems? What do we learn on one of the earlier slides we do with problems? It's just, oh, well, that's your thing to figure out, Sam. Oh, you're on it. You're on it. We own them. Now, it was an issue I had to figure out. We own it. We own it and address it. We own it and figure out how to solve it. All right? What did I need from my supervisor? I needed the balance of accountability with support. Because here's the thing. Can we all agree? It couldn't be just accepted that, oh, she just comes back 5 minutes late every time, right? Can we all agree that that was not okay, that I have to be woken up to sew back up, to be brought back upstairs? It's not okay. Had to be addressed, had to be dealt with, right? But can we also agree there's ways to address it while supporting? Here's the things that I heard during that time in my life. I heard comments like, man, I really wish I could help you, but you're going to have to figure this out on your own. Man, this really sucks, but, I'd hate to see you gone, but you're going to be gone. You're going to be gone soon, Sam. I was 3 years in to what would become now a over 10 years career. Man, hate to see you get fired for something so silly. These are the comments that I heard. Yeah, don't know how to help you. You need more coffee? Need more coffee? Oh, you already took 2 5-hour energies? All right. Okay. I had an ops manager back then. They're not at the agency anymore. I had an operations manager whose thing was they would just like make pots and pots of coffee, and they would just be like, just get some more coffee. Just get some more coffee. Never once did any of my supervisors say, first off, Sam, we love the initiative. So I want to address something quickly, because here's the thing, Amy, you're right? There was all these things, because at the same time, I got to address things on my own, right? I've got to own it too. And so here I was, the frontline person. I'm like, I'm setting alarms and I'm still sleeping through it. And I tried setting loud alarm. I would set alarms earlier, much earlier. I was still sleeping through it. And then what I said was, oh, okay, easy, got it. Just don't go to sleep. Don't nap. You think that stopped the tiredness? Nope. Nope. So here's what I never heard from any of my supervisors, right? I told you about all the things I heard, but here's what I never heard. Sam, we appreciate all the initiative that when we send out messages and we say, hey, we need someone to come in 4 hours early, or we need someone to stay over 4 hours after the shift. We love the fact that you're doing that, but until this gets sorted out, we can't allow that. I was still the person signing up and being like, I'll do it, and they're like, perfect. They would still come to me, hey Sam, can you come in early? Can you stay? Oh, awesome. There were times where I literally would come in early or stay late, and that very next shift, fall asleep, sleep through the alarm. You know what else no one said? Hey Sam, I know you've been a night shifter for a long time, but rather than just go ahead and write you off that you're not going to be here much longer, maybe night shift isn't working out. We get it. You love your shift, you love the atmosphere, you love the people, but we'd rather try every option we can. Brittany said they continue to allow the burnout rather than helping find solutions. And that was the thing. And we get that they were setting expectations. And you know how those expectations looked? Here's another more discipline, more suspension days. It was a point where they had literally had there was back-to-back suspension days, and they were like, yeah, you should be working out these suspension days, but we really can't afford you not to be here. So we're just gonna don't worry about it. And I was still showing up, working all the OT and tired. No one truly tried to identify the root causes. I would get questions of, are you sleeping? Are you sleeping enough? Yeah. Is your home life okay? Stuff going on there? No. No. And they were trying to figure out all that, but there were these immediate things that we could have done. My mother literally, in the most excellent moment of leadership that I could have ever asked for, she literally gave me the best advice that I needed someone to give me in that moment. She one day looked me square in the eye and said, I don't care how much you love night shift. I think you need to get off night shift. I went to my supervisors, and I said, I think I need to get off night shift. I need to go. I want to try out the power shift, which was 12 noon to 12 midnight. I said, I think that might be good, because the way that will work, there won't be that lull. Those are like prime hours for me, where I'll be awake. I think I should try that out off of my mother's advice. And they were like, maybe. And we went another few months, another couple of months, and more tardies. They were literally probably about to terminate me. And I had to go above all these supervisors that were not listening the first time that I brought something to them. Because here was the deal. They were like, well, Sam's kind of a problem, and we have to deal with that, but at the same time, we really don't want to lose someone off the shift. And I literally had to go to my director at the time And I sent an email and was like, I need off the night shift because I'm pretty sure if I stay here, I will be gone and I don't want to go. My mother was the only person, not my supervisor, not an ops manager, not anyone, to say, I don't care how much you love the people of night shift and you love night shift and you say you've been here 3 years on night shift. It's not working for you. You need to try every option possible before you are gone. I went to night shift and I spent the next 5 years of my career at that center, on power shift, 12 noon to 12 midnight. And I never had another tardy again. I had a manager who, after they found out that pretty much everybody, like, they had been superseded and the director got involved, and literally, like, the deputy director at that time came in that morning and made it, like, signed it, Sam is going to the power shift ASAP, immediate. I had a manager come to me and said this. He said, the grass isn't always greener on the other side, right? On power shift, you're going to be taking a lot more phone calls. I said, that's not my concern. My concern is I love this job and I want to be here and I'd rather try this out. And if this doesn't work for me, I get it. I'll go. But this is the first real option anyone has given me. And I never had another problem again. And in the 5 years, became a CTO, became a training technician, became a general instructor at the center. So when I tell you guys that I need you ought to be the supervisor that you needed, this is what I'm talking about. Because I could have been gone. Would have been gone. Had that option not even be brought to me. But it wasn't a supervisor that brought it to me. It was my mom. Compassion and accountability. Yes, you've got to hold your people accountable. And yes, discipline has to happen. And yes, there has to be structure, and we have to hold the standards and hold them to standards and make the statement. And as we all agreed, that was a real problem. And we could have literally tried to work it out and try to figure out all this stuff. I remember everything being thrown. Well, maybe it's a medical issue, maybe it's that. Here's the thing. It could have been a medical issue. But I wasn't diagnosed with one. There were immediate things that I needed a supervisor to say, let's try this. Hey, let's try. Hey, we're not going to be asking you to work all this overtime. Hey, let's try a different shift. Let's try anything before we lose the person. So now, I ask you, what is the time in your life, in your career, where maybe a supervisor or manager didn't show up in the way you needed them to show up? And maybe, because as we realize, some of that has to do with the lack of training, right? Maybe they didn't show up because they didn't know how to. Maybe the supervisors in my story, they didn't show up in the way I needed because they had never seen supervisors show up like that for them. So the cycle was continued. But what is a time where a leader may have failed you? And you thought back then, man, this was what I needed in that instance. Because I can tell you what I learned from my story. I learned there's always a reason. And sometimes it takes a little time, it takes a little care, it takes a little compassion to work to that root issue. But I also learned that if there's immediate things that we can try out, try it. Try it. Let's address the statement you see there. I don't want them to think I've changed. I asked y'all in the chat, like, who in this chat are new to the role of leadership, new supervisors, brand new managers, supervisors. This is another one of those statements that I've had people come up and they say, Sam, I'm trying to balance this thing because I'm trying to manage, I'm trying to lead, but at the same time, I want them to know I'm still the person I am. I'm still them. I'm just, I haven't changed. But here's the thing. You have changed. And that's not something to fear. That's not something to beat around the bush. Your role has changed. There will be changes. And this comes back to one of those things where it's that, man, I still want to be liked, and I want to. You've got to be respected. You are not the same person. Now, we're not talking about being high and mighty. We're not talking about letting the title change your mindset, your mentality. We're not talking about, hey, I told y'all the case of Brian and how Brian showed leadership before he got the title, right? And then he got the title. But with that title, right, there came changes. Now, Brian, who was the person buying the pizza, checking in on the folks on his shift, guess what? He became that even more so. There will be changes. There's got to be changes. Because as we realize, what gets you into the role of supervisor, manager, director is not going to be what keeps you there. All of those past achievements and commendations and everything that helped contributed to you being promoted is not going to be what keeps you in that position. Wendy said the balance can be difficult, especially if your position is still a part of the same union that the telecommunicators are a part of. Difficult, but not able to be balanced. And that's the key. I get. There's going to be challenges. There's going to be things that will feel a little bit uncomfortable. But with that title, and this is what you've got to let your people know. Yes, I'm me, but there are going to be changes. And in reality, they should want that. Because this is your job. Taking the charge, setting the tone, maintaining the standard. There's going to be things that you did really, really well, or habits that you had, or things that you did, that guess what? You're going to have to learn it in a different way, in a different light, because now you are a supervisor. There are going to be things you're going to have to unlearn in order to be a better leader. And you're going to have to continually grow and continuing learn. We all know how it is, right? Nobody wants to talk to someone, to deal with someone on a 911 call that sounds like, hey, they just got released yesterday. And they just sound like they're fresh and they don't have, the training hasn't even been established in them yet. Fine. But also, nobody wants to deal with that leader that just seems like they got grandfathered in 10, 15, 20 years ago and it hasn't been to a single class, course, workshop, conference since. Because it's got to be continuous. And anything that's continuous when it comes to training means there's going to be growth. It means you are going to change. And as long as that change brings meaning, brings direction to your shift, they're not going to fear that. They're going to embrace it. And those differences aren't something to hate or to shy away from. You are a different person. You wear a different title. Your heart absolutely should be should still be the same. You should still have a heart for your people. You should still have that passion. But it shouldn't even be the same passion. It should grow. It should be more. It should increase the longer you are in that role as a supervisor. Likability wins smiles, wins, hey, it might win you favor for a bit, but that doesn't win trust. So replace will they like me now that I'm a supervisor? Will they trust me? And then what do you commit to doing from here on out as a manager, as a supervisor, to ensure that trust is safeguarded and is protected? And that doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It may mean saying no. But at the heart of everything, you've got to be respectful. You can be firm. You can set that standard. You can issue that discipline when it has to be issued. But there's got to be respect there. And kindness, y'all, it has to be at the heart of everything. That chapter in my life with the tardies, the biggest problem I had, it wasn't, oh man, the discipline. I knew why I was getting disciplined. I was more let down every single time. I could tell in my supervisor's eyes that they had already written me off. There's nothing we can do for her. That was more disappointing than anything else. So you've got to discipline. You're going to say no. We get it. But trust, kindness, compassion, even when you issue discipline, make sure your people feel it. Make sure they know you're doing it not from a place of just punishing you. I'm doing it from a place of I want you to be better because I know what you're capable of. And I can't reward subpar performance because I know you are so much better than that. Not punitive, but out of a heart of I want to see you succeed. And I'm not going to feel satisfied as your supervisor, as your manager, as your director, until I see my people succeed. Talking about the people you lead as a supervisor, you remember, you're not just leading great folks in the seat, right? You realize you're getting a whole person. They come with interests, hobbies, love, family. There's people that love them. They've got emotions, they've got experiences, all of that. So when we talk about leading, you are leading people that's got a life outside of the job. That's why it's so important that they don't just feel valued when they're in the seat beneath the headset behind the computer. They've got to feel valued headset off, at home. Hey, you know what? I know you've been kicking butt and you're doing the job and that's awesome. But I'm just checking in on you as a person. I'm just checking in on you to make sure you're okay. You are getting what you need from me. I'm grateful that you're working the OT and you're clocking in, you're doing that. But show your folks they care, that you care about the whole person. And some of you, my leaders in the chat, you're listening to me and you probably are in a position right now where that's not what you're feeling. Because as someone said in the chat, some of the issue, and we talk about the burnt out supervisors and the burnt out leadership, is because you're not getting fed. And I wish we could change that narrative too. All I can ask you, though, is to be the difference for your people. And to be what you might not be getting, or what you might not have ever gotten. in a leader? How well do you know the people who report to you? Know what moves them? Knows what drives them? How well do you know someone that if they do something really great on a call, you know how to praise them, right? You realize some people don't want the public praise, right? Some people like the praise in private. Some people want that. They're like, man, I want that email to go out to the whole center. But you won't know unless you talk to your people. Because I know what it looks like. I remember one time we had a director, and we used to say all the time, we were pretty sure that she didn't know half of the people's our first names. And she could like walk up to you and she'd be like, hey, hi, you. How you doing? And we knew she didn't know us. She didn't know us. She didn't know anything about us. We're about to come up on our next break, but I quickly want to mention about this appeasement behavior. As supervisors, when we talk about looking for agreement and we talk about garnering agreement, right? Garnering true buy-in. Make sure you're not confusing appeasement behavior with actual comprehension or actual understanding or actual acceptance. Maybe you've seen this in dogs before. I've seen video before where it was a dog and it was like two dogs and it was the one dog that was sort of they kind of was tussling and you could tell that one alpha dog that took charge and the other one just sort of cowered to it, right? And if you've ever seen a dog that's afraid or is in a situation where they feel cornered or they feel nervous, you'll notice that like that the dog might lick the other dogs, the alpha dog's paws or something. They might start licking them, right? They might do things that we know we're like, man, some of those behaviors that we've seen our dogs do when like they're happy, right? But those aren't kisses. It's not kissing the alpha dog like I love you. That's appeasement behavior, as in I'm just trying to like I'm really uncomfortable right now, and I just want you to think that I accept it and I'm with you and I'm on board. So I'm just gonna nod. I'm just gonna agree. I'm just gonna be like, yeah. Make sure we're not, my leaders, we're not accepting appeasement behavior as actual acceptance, actual uh, compliance, actual engagement. Make sure it's not, don't just accept it like that's good enough for me when it could be coming out of they don't feel safe enough to disagree. They don't feel safe enough to say, actually, I don't understand why we're doing this. Or I'm trying to understand this. Because that's empty. That's empty. That's not actual comprehension. And if you talk about really wanting to make sure that you've got true understanding and true compliance, one of the best ways to do it is to apply what we call the teach back method. And if any of you maybe served in healthcare or you know people who's in healthcare, the teach back method is one of the things that a lot of healthcare providers use in like consultations. So if they're talking to someone and they're explaining about, hey, this is the condition that you have and this is the treatment plan we're going to put you on, right? What that doctor will do, that medical practitioner will do is he'll say, okay, this I want you to say it back to me, all right? Repeat back to me. What condition you have? This is the condition I have. I understand these are the symptoms that come with it. I understand this is the treatment plan I'm going to be on. And it's a way of them ensuring that the patient truly understands their condition, their symptoms, the treatment plan, everything. They have them say it back. And that's one of the best ways to really gauge, do they understand? And that could be before they agree, but just making sure they have an understanding. And it's not just, they're just too afraid to say, I don't understand. Have them say it back to you. Repeat back to me. Okay, I want you to tell me, explain to me what did I just say to you is the problem here. But when you do that and you ask for feedback, please make sure, remember, you've got to reward it with, you got to reward the honesty. Because you can't say, I want all the honest feedback, and then immediately snap at them, right? That is not what we're going to do. So we're moving on to this next one here. What if you were my supervisor? But we've got to take a break. So we're going to take a 15-minute break. We're going to round that up to 3:25, and we're going to say back at 3:40, so we can wrap this up. Got a few minutes here for folks to come back, but man, that's incredible, y'all. I mean, the range. You know what's wild to me too? We had folks in the chat. Wendy, I saw someone. I think Wendy, you said 1 year. Someone had 2 years. I love when I teach a class as well, and you get somebody who's like a few months, a year, 2 years, because that tells me, look, you're just starting, and you're already thinking about the legacy you want to leave, or you're already thinking about where you want to go and what you want to do in this profession. Man, I love that. We just I'm looking at it all over. We have you've got to celebrate this because y'all know this is Public Safety Appreciation Week, right? October 6th. Started October 6th. Like this is if anybody's going to appreciate us, we got to appreciate each other. So I appreciate all of you. Seriously. Seriously. Man. 15, 16, 20 years. This is what fills my cup. This is what keeps me going. And for whatever reason you're still around, you're doing it, whether it's chose to stick around for another year to make it year 2 or chose to stick around to make it year 21, 25, man, thank you. Thank you. Because we need you, right? We need you, and we need you. I'm again, I left my agency where I was at full time to be a traveling dispatcher. I don't do what y'all do day in, day out. Okay? I come in and I fill the seat, or I get to do trainings like this. But I don't count myself as part of still the helpers and the heroes that you folks are. And I'll have people who ask me and want and have questions about Sam, what life looks like outside of the seat. And I tell you what, and I tell them, look, I had my reasons for leaving the agency that I did, and some of us do. But here's the thing, everyone can't leave. So those of you who are still in it, thank you. Thank you. Look at that. 3 years at the center, became sergeant October 5th. All right, Sally. Kimberly said 12 years in December. Man, that's awesome. That's awesome. We took a late break, y'all. I definitely, can you tell I'm a dispatcher because I'm bad about taking breaks, and I was like, oh man, but we had to take a quick break because we've got some exercises that looks like some deep introspection and reflection, and I'm gonna ask you to drop in the chat to really think about it for a moment. We didn't get into some of our the difficult conversations and what that looks like. That's one of the challenges of compressing a longer class into a really small one. But I hope that we were able to tackle a lot that you were looking for today as we wrap up. And I tell you what, I have a blast with these trainings. Again, shout out to North Carolina APCO. Even my last one, I've already had a couple of centers that reached out and was like, hey, we've got to get this training because I do it virtually or I do it in person as well. So, and as you can see, these classes, they can go as long as you want, or sometimes you can make it shorter. There's more I wanted to talk about today, but I guess we got a hard stop at 4. Apparently y'all do have the rest of the day y'all need to get to. And I know I said 3:40, but I'm gonna go ahead and start. Looks like a lot of y'all are still around. Really, thank y'all. Y'all have been incredible. I tell you what, what makes these classes so fun and engaging is all the interaction and the engagement. I can sit here and teach for 3 hours and not a word. But it's y'all that really just added to it, just filled my cup up. Absolutely. So we're wrapping up, and I had to, what y'all didn't see is I had to skip several slides so we could get towards the end here. Let's talk about tools for trust, though. I already told y'all, it's not about perfection, but it is absolute. You got to keep the humanity in leadership. And sometimes I say that, and I know that's easier said than done because y'all, I bet some of y'all feel like we expect some superhuman lengths out of y'all. And hey, I admit I'm that person, came from the front lines. I used to expect the sun, moon, and stars from my supervisors. You know? And I get it. That's not realistic. That's not realistic. So I know we say about keep it human and stuff, but we're also looking to you to do some superhuman things. Y'all are amazing. This class is never any class I ever teach about leadership and stuff. It's always about, I get some of you are doing what you can with what you got. I'm only asking to continue to grow and improve from it. When we talk about trust, commitments is so important. Your people don't forget, right? They don't forget. You say, hey, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then you don't. Something as simple as coming back around and addressing it and everything. And even if it's to address it to say, hey, I know I said that we were going to implement this new thing. We were going to bring a popcorn machine in, and we never brought the popcorn machine. Hey, I'm sorry. I thought we could afford it. I thought we would get approval for it. I thought the money was in the budget. I mentioned that because I love seeing popcorn machines in 911 centers. I'm a big popcorn fan. Even a simple, hey, address it. This is why this isn't happening. Sorry. What did we say? What's that keyword? What's those 3 letters? It's not a problem, right? And if it is a problem, what do we do? That's right. We own it. Admit your mistakes openly. You know why it's so important to admit it openly? Because your people see it in the open. You're talking about it. So don't hide. There's no need to hide it, right? You are human. You are human. That's okay. Admit it. Sorry. I used to tell trainees all the time, there is no rule that you can't apologize to a caller. It's not like, you said I'm sorry. That now you just lost all credibility with them because you admitted you did a mistake. No, I'm sorry. I apologize. I misheard you. Samantha said I even called the caller back to apologize. Wow. There you go. Look, overachiever. Exactly. It's not wrong to admit mistakes. Share rationale for tough decisions. That's important because I get sometimes you are going to have to make those tough executive decisions. When we say trust, that works both ways. Don't think that I'm saying just about being trustworthy. That works, that we got to trust our leadership. So sometimes you've got to make those hard, tough executive decisions. Hey, I'm making this decision because I believe it's for the best of the CIF. It's for the best of the center. But share your rationale. We are so beyond the just because I said so. When we talk about principles of adult learners, how we learn, we do not learn from because I said so. That worked when we were kids. Barely for some of us. But it worked when we were kids and maybe with our parents. That does not work in the real world as adult learners, right? So those are some tools for trust. Resilience is so important, and I just want to say this quickly. Resilience, remember what it is. Resilience is not just, just you can't take a break after every call, right? We talk about resilience training in 911. That doesn't look like after every tough call we take a break. And it doesn't. But what it does look like is it looks like there's got to be a plan in place to make sure we are addressing when people are not okay. Not simply just bouncing back, but so they can go forward in a healthy manner. Not just coping, but actual healing, actual wholeness, actual progress to get better, to grow, to feel okay. Okay? Actual resilience. Leadership, and I tell you, set the standard. Are there any Brene Brown fans in the chat? Brene Brown, she talks a lot about vulnerability. All right, I see you, Clara. She talks a lot about vulnerability. And I tell you what, there's a fine line, and I get it, and it's all about balance. But please, my supervisors, my managers, don't be afraid to be vulnerable at times. And so, especially when we're talking about things like mental health and healing and all of that, sometimes it does look like being vulnerable and admitting. And I get, you want to be strong for your people. You're like, I don't want them to think I broke down. But you have a tough call that comes into your center. Y'all, you're a human, right? Y'all deal with the calls as well, supervisors. No one says that, you deal with a tough call. My agency, we dealt with my old agency double line of duty death. You think there was a supervisor around that felt like they had to be super strong? We all felt it. And we all weren't okay in our own ways. And so as a supervisor, leading that charge, being like, hey, I know I'm not okay, and I know I'm going to have to talk to somebody about it. Set that example for your people. You're not going to lose credibility. We get this stuff in our head. We think we will. You won't. It's that human factor, right? Supervisors, here's what I need you to take away from the slide. We've got to be in some way having some regular audits of our behavior, of our performance. And it's got to be objective. It's got to be objective, right? But we've got to make sure there's alignment across the shifts, because I don't know about y'all, but I am so tired of hearing, well, this is what we do on this shift, and this supervisor's on duty, and it's day shift, but on night shift, no, y'all. No, y'all. That's not sustainable. That's not sustainable. And also, how do you train? How do you train with that? And Susan said it still happens, right? It sure does. So I'll quickly touch on this, but I want to get to these exercises because you got to do a little writing. You got to do a little writing here. Supervisors, you are multipliers. I talked about you being influencers, but you are multipliers. The whole goal is that you should be producing I shouldn't be producing more Sams. I should be producing more people who are passionate about training, not as passionate as I am, but even more passionate, more heartfelt, more driven to train, more motivated to train. My leaders in this chat, on this class, who will watch it later, your goals should be multiplying the leaders in your center. Multiplying the leaders in your center. Not just clones. We're not just talking about cloning more people that look like you, lead like you. They should be better than you. They should go even further than you ever. Here's the first question. And I'm gonna ask y'all, I need y'all to sit up. Y'all been good already. Y'all been typing in this chat. I need some answers to this, all right? Here's question number 1. Jennifer, I love that. Vulnerability with boundaries. Absolutely. Because it's all about boundaries, right? It's all about borders. We get that. No one wants to. Yes, we're not talking about your supervisor and you're being vulnerable and you crashing out. You still have to be that structure. You still have to set that standard of it's going to be okay. But you've also got to practice what you preach. Yes, you've got to practice what you preach. And because your people will be, you can say all day, yeah, if you're not okay, you need to reach out. But I never have to reach out. I'm always okay. Lead by example. So question number 1, y'all already on it. What is one leadership tool you will commit to using this week? This week. You see that, right? Because I said in the beginning, if this class, you walk away from this, you leave this and you're like, man, that was awesome. Man, some great stuff. And you never implement it, then apparently I didn't do my job as instructor. Send me an email at the end of this and you be like, Sam, do better. Because the whole thing is, thank you. I'm seeing you on the chat. It's you. I want immediate something. You don't got to implement every single tool it was in here, but I've got to believe in my heart of hearts that you walk away from this and something gets done by the end of this week. Here's question number 2, y'all. Number 2. What is the hardest conversation you have had or expect to have as a supervisor? And when I teach this class in person, we usually have a little bit more time, so we kind of go over some of that and we'll do a little role play. But if you've had those hard conversations, I want to know, or what is ones you expect? Because I can tell you some of the ones you can expect. You can expect conversations about gossip. You can expect conversations about unproductive behavior. You can expect conversations about, yes, poor performance. You can expect conversations about, I love it, conflict resolution, having to let someone go. Oh, appearance and presentability. Ooh, that's big. Because we never have people not just, sew up and they're not wearing proper attire, right? Proper uniform. Negativity, talking about people, hygiene, morale. This is real, right? And here's the thing. One of the stuff that I didn't get to talk about, but I've got to mention it quickly. Does anybody know what a prescribed burn is? Have you ever heard that term before? Prescribed burns. What is it? And what is the purpose of prescribed burns? Because I was with a friend of mine a couple weeks ago, and we went to Quabbin Valley. And I saw up there, oh yes, you're answering. I saw up there a poster, and it was talking about how they had done prescribed burns. Yes, so many reasons, but one of the reasons for prescribed burns is because they'll look and they'll say, hey, there's an area, there's a valley, whatever, and we can tell there's a lot of overgrowth, and it's tracking. There's going to be a lot of overgrowth in the coming years that we're worried that if a fire breaks out, it's going to be a wildfire. And it's going to get out of control. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a prescribed burn to tackle the overgrowth now. Now, someone would say, well, what's the difference? Burn, baby, burn. It's going to burn. What does it matter if it burns in a wildfire or it burns in a prescribed burn? And that's it, Susan. As a supervisor, we need to control the chaos. One of those hard conversations you will have to have is that there's stuff that's got to get cut. And true story, I've seen supervisors could see two people like having it out on the floor, and they're like, oh, it'll work itself out. Will it? Will it work itself out, or is it going to get to the point where it's a wildfire that you can't control? And now you got two people who won't talk to each other, and a call comes in, they're working sister radios, and they really need to be communicating with each other, and they're not. So we can have it burn out of control, or we could burn it proactively and burn it, control that burn, control that fire, and do it with order. That's the difference. Order, chaos. Let's get quick question number 3, y'all. In the chat, what is one way you can be the supervisor you once needed? Because we said it wasn't about dragging the old supervisors, but we all know what it looks like. That feeling that someone made us feel way back when, and we're like, I never want anyone to feel that feeling again. I once had a manager tell me, and it wasn't from the manager. He was telling me it on behalf of someone else, and he basically said, hey, so-and-so said they don't know how to talk to you, Sam. And I remember just that feeling of, what? A lot of y'all dropped in the chat, show up. Isn't that crazy? That sounds so simple, but show up. That's like saying be present. That's one of the biggest principles of peer support, of just being present, just showing up. Lead by example. I love that, Adrian. Yes. Latricia says building up employees, not being a know-it-all. Talk to them like we are equals. Talk to them like we are equals. Leave your ego at the door. Wow. And question number 4, y'all. What would trainee you thank you for doing differently as a leader today? I want to end it with you celebrating yourselves. I said to y'all, hey, sometimes you don't give yourself enough credit. Give yourself credit. This is your chance to do that. Being kind, empathetic, and approachable. Yes, Beth. Yes. Showing up, supporting your team. Remember, you're still human. And so for those of you who have set out to be the difference, and maybe you did it without going to classes, without formal training, or maybe you did go through training and you actually adhered to it and you listened and you learned and you decided to be the supervisor you didn't have, the manager you didn't have. Thank you. Thank you. Because it makes all the difference in the world, y'all. And there is a link in there. Make sure y'all copy that link to fill out, because I want y'all to get your certificate. But these are the takeaways as you'll go about the rest of your day, rest of your week. Rumor has it I will be coming back for another session virtually, and I've got a couple of in-person sessions coming up with North Carolina APCO, so I look forward to seeing y'all. But here are the takeaways. Supervisors, you set the culture. You just do. You just do. Leadership requires growth. I would love, for those who are aspiring to be, I would love if you're at centers where they're actually growing you into it. But if they're not, there is such a thing as self-investment. So my folks in this chat who said, hey, 1 year, 2 years, whatever, and you're already thinking about maybe a leadership role, a training role, start growing your skills now. You're obviously doing it. You're attending this class. I don't believe there's anybody in the chat, correct me if I'm wrong, who is attending this class at gunpoint, or attending this class because someone said, if you don't attend this class, you will be terminated. So you chose. Now, you could say, hey, it was strongly recommended I attend. But either way, you chose to be here. So that's already you investing in yourself. People first leadership drives retention. It absolutely drives retention. People first. Process, I get, is important, but process to me is always second. And trust, feedback, and intentional culture, that is intentional. Because again, if you don't be proactive about it, a culture is being set in your center, just like standards are being set. It can be set accidentally, like a wildfire, or it can be set with order, with control, with deliberation. Thank you all. I've seen all of y'all who's in the chat. Amazing. Really, thank yourselves as well. You're absolutely incredible. And yes, I did tell y'all I'm on LinkedIn a lot. That is the QR code to LinkedIn. Or you can also just search Samantha Hawkins on LinkedIn and you'll find me. I'm on there as well. So connect with me. That is the email. If there's anything I could send you to help reinforce this training or whatever, to chat for peer support, what have you, I am available and I'm here. And always, don't tempt me with a good time. Like I said, after the last training, I had folks like, hey, I want you to teach this in person or virtual. Bet. I will do that because I'm all about it. Literally, that's my other job. When I'm not in the seat supporting staffing and helping with that, I'm always traveling and teaching as well. So y'all have been incredible. The engagement is wonderful. And a quick shout out again, North Carolina APCO. Thank y'all for what you do. Samantha, you've been amazing, Samantha Dutch. And y'all see her email. If there's any questions you have specifically regarding this training or anything, she's the person to contact. Thank you all. And again, have a great rest of your day, great rest of your month. And proud of y'all. Proud of y'all. Thank you for what you do. And thank you for making 911 great. Y'all take care.